Our topic is a recently published book by PM Press, which has also been translated to many other languages. The book is called Building Free Life, Dialogues with Öcalan. The book consists of 20 essays by world-renowned intellectuals such as David Graeber, Antonio Negri, John Holloway, and Immanuel Wallerstein. And all the essays engage with the ideas of Abdullah Öcalan, who is the leader of the Kurdish freedom movement and who has been kept in isolation in an island prison by the Turkish government, Turkish state, since 1999. Building Free Life, Dialogues with Öcalan is edited by the international initiative Freedom for Abdullah Öcalan and Peace in Kurdistan. So we have here Havin Guneser, a member of the initiative and the main person who took the responsibility for bringing these essays together. Welcome, Havin.
Thank you very much, Nazan. Thanks.
And so, Havin, can you tell us a little bit about the background of this book? I know that, for example, the timing was very important, and you can talk about that. And also tell us a little bit about how you decided or why now here this book.
Yes, thank you. As you mentioned, of course, this grew as an idea first within the international initiative Freedom for Öcalan and Peace in Kurdistan. Our listeners may or may not know that all his prison writings are actually court submissions. So they are not actually books that Öcalan sat down to write as books, you know. For us, of course, it was a bit of a concern because Öcalan had already been on the Imralı Island prison for the past 20 years. This was back in 2019, of course. And he was 70 years old. His birthday was coming up, and he was kept under severe isolation conditions, which is still the case, by the way. So there are at times visits by his lawyers or family are allowed, but only after severe pressure mounted by the society, these consultations or visits take place. So what we wanted to do was, you know, we wanted to turn this isolation around because as books or, you know, his prison writings into different languages, we saw that he holds dialogues with a lot of different people. Although we know that Kurdish society relied heavily on an oral tradition, you know, songs, conversation, and word of the mouth, especially because of the fact that anything to do with Kurds or Kurdish were actually seen legally non-existent, and thus were out of the reach of the people. So this massive transformation of the Kurdish society in the last 40 years, you know, it didn't happen primarily through dialogue, through word of the mouth. So we thought that we adopted this unusual dialogue that Öcalan took on in his own books to intellectuals around the world, or with movements, or even with deceased people, you know, with ideas of the deceased people, including at times his mother or his comrades, etc. So we wanted to turn this around on his 17th birthday after 20 years in prison and make this book where these movements or intellectuals of, you know, different areas go back into dialogue with him about what he has written. So we thought we could maybe contribute to actually breaking this isolation and make sure different intellectuals, activists around the world can continue this unusual form of dialogue. Of course, that this book would make its way into the island prison and into Öcalan's hands and that, it would grow, this quest for building free life from there.
I mean, when I was skipping through the book, what amazes me, of course, are all these names that you brought together. Very prominent intellectuals from a number of different countries: India, the Balkans, South America, Europe, United States. So how did you bring all these people together? How did they respond to your request?
Yeah, I think, the diversity of the intellectuals themselves in reality relate to the diversity of topics and issues that Öcalan goes into. Öcalan has been delving not only into history, not only into philosophy, not only into the social sciences and ecology, into women's freedom. It's a vast area to delve into and to bring together, actually, in his own writings. So his dialogues has been actually with such a vast topics and issues. Therefore, he appealed, I guess, to a lot of different people. And as his books were translated into different languages, and it was able to reach those people whose major concern are the different issues and topics that we've gone through in the book. I guess it brought people together, and so he really appeals to a lot of different people. And maybe I can give such an example. When I was in Vermont, for example, in the USA, I went into this secondhand bookshop. They are friends of ours, and he said, when he had his book, Öcalan's book, he really wasn't sure where to place it. Whether under history or philosophy or social sciences, where to place Öcalan, because, as I said, it brings a lot of different disciplines together to be able to come with a comprehensive response to this building of free life, which is the title of this book. And of course, we've been in touch with these people, with these different people, whether it's due to the challenging capitalist modernity conferences that we hold with a lot of different people or groups in Hamburg University. So these discussions have been actually held over the 20 years in some manner. And we really wanted to bring together these discussions in one book to show this whole process of dialoguing.
Mm-hmm. My next question will be about the content of the book. There are different sections in the book, and you have every section has 3 or more people contributing. Can you talk to us about the sections and maybe a little bit about the content of the book? What kind of ideas are dwelled in, etc.?
Mm-hmm. I guess, it was what we wanted to do was make a little bit of an executive summary of the last 20 years in some manner. I guess for the very first time, Ocalan was discussed, his ideas, his philosophy was discussed away from issues of security, away from issues of national question or national issues. Therefore, it was quite exciting for us as well. So we actually then wanted to find ways and manners of bringing these books, these texts together. Therefore, we divided up into 4 sections actually. So what we wanted to do was bring in, different forwards that we had from several intellectuals for his books over the last 20 years, or bring in the analysis of the way he was abducted, from Kenya as a NATO operation, and the illegalness of this, which is laid by, let's say, by Norman Pech, I guess, and others, or people like Otegi, who was in prison and who was a leader of the Basque freedom movement as well, or people who began to just get to know him because he would discuss some of his ideas also in his own books. So it's a special chapter as such, and I really recommend this chapter because it also shows how this change occurred. The way that he was also positioned and viewed over the 20 years. So it's an important chapter in that respect, I guess. And section 2 delves into this origins of civilization a little bit, and it gives this comprehensive account of human history. Öcalan does in his books, but there, Peter Lamborn Wilson goes into a bit of a dialogue on this, especially in relation to the Sumerian civilization and discussions on that. And Öcalan does a lot of discussion on monotheistic tradition, where Donald Matthews and Thomas Miley engage with him on that, and Muriel Athenas a little bit more on gender and history. Whereas section 3, I think you mentioned this as well, it adds this amazing spatial and comparative perspective to Öcalan's thoughts and texts, I guess, and what we wanted to do, and this is why we called it viewing and linking, is this ideas about, the Balkans and the confederalism ideas that came up there in the past, as well as Rada de Souza's, Eastern perspective, Raul Zebeci's, I guess, the Latin American perspective, and how they really fit in together, and the dialoguing that goes on there. Section 5 is a little bit more about engagement, about his political philosophy, and in fact political action, and on his methodology, and then on his theory. And here I think your text, Nazan, and David Graeber's text, and all the others, of course, like Fabian Scheidler and Pat Huff and Damien Garber and others, are amazingly important, because it goes into addressing dilemmas about how Öcalan engages and tries to deconstruct hierarchy, and his views on labor theory, value theory, and etc., but also where your text especially delves into the questions of universe, existence, afterlife, truth, and how Öcalan responds to these questions in his quest for freedom and building of free life. And I guess Fabian Scheidler's text is also interesting, because he looks at Rojava as the art of transition in a collapsing civilization. So it's not just about theory, but also about doing and building now and here. Another unusual text is, of course, by Michael Panza, who was killed as a result of a Turkish airstrike. He was also seeking truth in many different ways, both in theory and also in practice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, thank you, Havin. Maybe in a very, very short way, can you tell us why should people read this book? Why is it so important for people to read this book?
Yeah, I think it's this unusual form of intellectual exchange from variety of peoples from different backgrounds, and I don't mean their ethnicity, but I mean in terms of their backgrounds of struggle and intellectual backgrounds. are, they are coming together discussion to further this quest for freedom. So I think it's important to then, to continue to join this struggle. We are hoping that it will inspire many more people to come together and join to this dialogue and engage in this worldwide search for alternatives. So the topics are unusually broad in scope. It's not just concentrating on one point, but it is bringing together different worlds. And in these different worlds, it is actually bringing together these universal points of struggle from these different perspectives. So it's different but similar in that sense. And it is, I think it's also, it's making an important contribution to the struggle between capitalist modernity and democratic modernity as the current expression of the conflict that we are experiencing today in our world. So it's an, I think what's something constant throughout the book is this excitement about the authors of the texts, the excitement of the moment that we have reached, both in terms of Öcalan texts, but also what's happening throughout the world. So I think it's an amazing discussion for a quest to build free life.
Thank you, Havin. I really enjoyed this talk. I mean, how the book. I really hope that the book will reach as many people as possible, and people will be introduced to one of the most important political leader and intellectual of our times. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you very much, Nazan.